The house is in such a mess, and you don't do any housework. You're a terrible wife. Get out of this house and leave my grandkids behind.
Although I had given birth to boy and girl twins, my MIL told me that she only needed grandsons, and then she suddenly handed me divorce papers. The space for my husband's name was already filled out. I was told that this divorce was also his decision. I felt despair. Then my husband appeared.
You can stop being her daughter-in-law now.
Was it true that my husband wanted a divorce? I felt the world go dark, but then the true meaning of my husband's words became clear. My name is Summer. I'm a homemaker in my late 20s. I got married to my colleague Ken last year. And even after marriage, I didn't quit my job, continuing to work full-time while maintaining our married life. My husband, who is 3 years younger than me, has a calm and easygoing personality, rather than being overly particular about things. Even if I occasionally cut corners on housework or serve instant noodles or ready-made dishes for dinner, he doesn't complain and is cooperative with household chores. He's my proud husband who says that as long as we're a happy couple, that's all that matters. We had been leading a peaceful and happy married life. Then one day, I found out that I was pregnant. It seemed that the possibility of twins was high, as the doctor informed me. I had left it to the natural flow of things, and to be honest, I was more surprised than anything that it happened so quickly. On the contrary, my husband was overjoyed and seemed like he was about to start dancing. I had wanted to enjoy our newlywed life together a little longer, but as I watched my husband's excitement grow, I too began to feel more and more joyful. I continued to work as usual, but when my belly started to show, I went on maternity leave. By that time, my anxiety had grown as big as my belly. My parents' home is far away, and they run their own business, so I couldn't expect to have them help me with the childbirth or the care of the baby. As a new mom with no experience in childcare, I lacked confidence in whether I could take care of twins. Moreover, as I read parenting books, my anxiety only grew. I was feeling emotionally unstable from the time I got pregnant, and reading childcare books made me even more anxious. My husband, who sensed my anxious feelings, encouraged me, and I continued to live day by day. Since I went on maternity leave, I spent most of my days quietly at home. This day was no exception. After seeing my husband off to work, I did some light cleaning and then relaxed in the room. While drinking tea on the sofa, the doorbell rang. Wondering who it was, I answered the intercom, and there was my MIL. My MIL had suddenly come to our house. I was tense and nervous, to be honest. Meeting my MIL was the first time since our wedding. Although our house and my in-laws' house are only a 15-minute walk apart, we had never visited each other even during the holidays, and they had never called us once. The relationship between my MIL and us had become distant. There was a reason for this. It had to do with the relationship between my husband and my MIL. My husband is the second son of 2 boys, but my MIL has always had a strong preference for the firstborn and heir, and she has never paid any attention to my husband. My husband seemed to have felt quite lonely when he was a child because of this. A few years before we got married, my Phil passed away, and my MIL's dependence on her eldest son increased, while her interest in my husband dwindled even further. For that reason, even after we got married, I had very little interaction with my in-laws. And yet, my MIL had come to our house. I nervously welcomed her inside. She boldly entered the house, sat down on the living room sofa, and spoke before I had a chance to greet her.
I heard you're pregnant. Are the babies in your belly boys?
It seemed like she had somehow heard about my pregnancy and had come to check on me. By this time, we already knew the gender, so I honestly reported that there were twin boy and girl in my belly. In response, my MIL broke into a big smile and clapped her hands.
Oh my, boys, that's fantastic. Our family is secure now.
She exclaimed with joy. She eagerly started talking, celebrating the birth of a male heir. My husband's older brother and his wife have 3 children, all girls. As she was adamant about having a male heir, this was apparently unacceptable. She had sternly told her eldest son's wife, "You can only give birth to girls. You're a woman with nothing but daughters. Give birth to a male heir." As a result, the eldest son's wife got angry and left home. Furthermore, the relationship between the older brother's couple had soured, and they are currently going through divorce mediation. That's when she heard about my pregnancy from relatives and rushed over. It seems she was really glad that I was here. She smiled warmly while gazing at my belly. "Take care and do your best from now on," she said, offering words of encouragement. I was surprised by the sudden change in attitude, especially since we had never been involved with each other before. Furthermore, when I tried to make tea while listening to her, she stopped me.
I'll do it, Summer. You should sit down. You're not alone anymore.
While saying that, she stood up and instructed me to rest, and then she prepared tea. Despite my confusion, she continued to take the liberty of preparing dinner and cleaning the bath.
I'll come to help you every day from now on. I'm here to ensure the birth of a healthy male heir.
With those words, she left for the day. That evening, when my husband returned home, I told him about her visit during the day. My husband also showed a surprised expression, just like me.
Well, if she's willing to help, why not take advantage of it? Summer, you can rely on your own family, and if there's someone nearby willing to help, I'm grateful too.
My husband innocently laughed upon hearing that my MIL had done household chores. During pregnancy, I tended to get emotional over trivial things, and I would have preferred to decline the help of my distant MIL. However, since my husband had been treated as if he were non-existent by his mother all along, he seemed pleased that she was concerned about us. It'd be nice if this becomes the opportunity for my husband and my MIL to mend their relationship, I thought, and I nodded in agreement with my husband's words. After that, my MIL came to our house as she had declared, every day. She not only prepared meals but also did the cleaning, laundry, and even gave me massages from time to time. She took care of everything, and it was a great help to us.
I'm here to ensure the birth of a healthy and robust male heir.
However, I became increasingly frustrated with being told the same thing every day. It seemed like she regarded me as a tool for producing a male heir. While it appeared that she was being considerate, I could somehow sense the underlying meaning behind her words. I continued to endure my pregnancy life like this, and finally I reached the 9th month. One day, as I had anticipated, my water broke at home. My MIL's actions at that moment were swift. She quickly packed the necessary items into a bag, shoved me into a taxi, and we headed straight to the hospital. I couldn't help but feel grateful that she was there by my side at that moment. The next day, I gave birth to healthy twins. Watching my husband and my MIL hold hands and shed tears of joy, I felt truly happy. I was genuinely happy. Until that day. After a few days in the hospital, I returned home with the 2 babies, and what followed was a battle against sleep deprivation. During the night, I would wake up to the cries of the children. I rubbed my tired eyes and picked up my son. Then, my daughter would start crying too. "You're a good baby, so please don't cry." With my son in my right hand and my daughter in my left, I tried to comfort them while feeling like crying myself. My husband helped with putting them to sleep and feeding, but since we had twins, it was more than twice the effort. There was no time for my fatigue to recover, and I felt increasingly drained with each passing day. Amidst all this, there was an event that further exhausted me. My MIL continued to visit our home every day even after childbirth. I initially thought her presence was reassuring, but she only took care of our son. She would feed him milk and change his diapers while completely ignoring our daughter. She only spoke to and showed affection to my son, completely ignoring my daughter even when her diaper was dirty. When I asked her to take care of our daughter, she would come up with flimsy excuses like my back hurts and refuse. I felt dissatisfied with her attitude, but I had no other choice. I told myself that it was better than not having her at all and continued to take care of the children on my own. However, my cunning MIL seemed to have seen through my thoughts. Gradually, she started showing a more overbearing attitude towards me.
Is dinner ready yet? You're really fussy.
As if she no longer had any responsibilities for housework after I gave birth. I could easily prepare a one-dish meal for myself, but with my food-loving MIL around, it wasn't that simple.
Your breast milk production is poor because you're eating like this. Using formula milk is a failure as a mother.
When I served simple dishes or ready-to-eat side dishes, she would order me to remake the meal. I explained to her that it was not because my breast milk production was poor, but because I had to feed both of them, so using formula milk was necessary. In response, she said something unbelievable.
It would have been better if you had only given birth to the boy. The girl doesn't need breast milk, right? Priority should always be given to the important heir.
She was telling me to only give breast milk to her grandson, even though they were both her grandchildren. It's surprising how she treats them so differently just because they have different genders, even though they are the same grandchildren. I had tolerated her behavior until now, but these words made me furious. "I don't need your help anymore. Please leave." I couldn't entrust my precious children to someone like her. I felt sorry for my husband, but I decided to stop having her come to our house. I grabbed her arm and led her towards the front door.
What are you doing? That hurts, don't pull me.
Ignoring her cries, I forcibly escorted her outside. "Please don't come to our house anymore," I declared and forcefully closed the front door. She banged on the door and shouted insults for a while, but eventually she quieted down and left. That night, when my husband returned from work, we had a discussion. My MIL had called him to complain. She was apparently making up stories about getting injured when I threw her out. I explained what had actually happened.
It looks like your mom hasn't changed at all.
Hearing that, my husband sighed and showed a sad expression. Afterwards, my husband called his mother and firmly warned her not to interfere in our child care. He told her not to come to our house anymore, and then she apparently cried, saying, "I don't want to stop seeing my grandchildren." However, neither my husband or I have any intention of letting her into our house anymore. I thought we were finally free from her, but I was mistaken. 3 days after that phone call, my MIL showed up as if nothing had happened. Even when I told her that I didn't want her to come anymore, she completely ignored it and tried to barge into the house.
You must not be getting much sleep, right? I can take care of the kids for you. How about taking a little nap?
She even tried to tempt me with sweet words as my sleep-deprived and exhausted mind struggled. She looked at my face with dark circles under my eyes and laughed.
I've reflected on my actions. I love both of my grandchildren equally.
Trying to step inside as I was about to close the door, I warned her once again, if anything like this happens again, you won't see your grandchildren for the rest of your life. Reluctantly, I led her into the house. My MIL chuckled as she looked around the messy room.
But I'm necessary after all,
she said as if mocking me. However, I was too exhausted to muster any anger at the moment. She suggested that I lay down on the sofa, so I did. How much time had passed? I was awakened by my daughter's crying. She had been crying for quite a while. Her face was soaked with tears, and her diaper was swollen. I changed my daughter's diaper and picked her up, but then I suddenly realized something. My son, who should have been in the next baby crib, was nowhere to be found. I panicked and looked around, but my MIL was also gone. I tremblingly called my husband. Your mother and our son have disappeared from the house, I exclaimed in a panic. My husband tried to calm me down and assured me that he would come home immediately. I strapped my daughter into the baby carrier and headed to the front door, where my MIL was standing, holding my son. "Please don't take my son without permission," I shouted. And then she wore a condescending expression and tightly hugged my son, making a declaration.
I will raise this child. You're incompetent as a mother, unable to produce enough breast milk, and the house is always a mess. You're a terrible wife.
She shouted, then handed me a piece of paper. It was a divorce notice, and my husband's name was already filled out. What? I stood there in shock as she began explaining that it was my husband's decision. She claimed that my husband had been complaining about me not doing any housework since we got married. When I found out I was pregnant, my husband asked me to watch my diet and stop eating junk food. I had often neglected housework due to my job, and our meals were often made up of pre-cooked dishes. Looking back, I could kind of see why he was saying that. But I never imagined that Ken had been harboring such complaints. I was deeply shaken by the revelation that my husband had been complaining about me to my MIL.
Ken wants a divorce. Go ahead and sign the papers.
She thrust the divorce papers in front of my face. Confused and frozen with indecision, I heard a voice from behind her say, "Hey." It was my husband. His eyes were colder than I had ever seen them.
It's okay. You can quit being her daughter-in-law now.
He spoke to me with that cold expression, as I was about to ask if what his mother said was true. I can quit being her daughter-in-law now. Did that mean he was going along with his mother's wishes for a divorce? If he had any complaints about me, why didn't he talk to me directly? In that moment, feeling a sense of despair, my husband snatched the divorce papers from his mother's hand and tore them to shreds.
Complaining about Summer like that. When did I ever discuss that with my mom? You're still making up lies. Unbelievable. Don't ever interfere with our marriage and our children again.
My husband denied having filled out such a form and reclaimed our son from his mother. While I was sleeping, she had gone to the city office to get the divorce papers. And it seemed she had filled out my husband's part herself. It was forgery. I couldn't believe she would go to such lengths to make us divorce.
No, because with a wife as incompetent as her, won't you struggle too?
It's for your sake, she clung to my husband. But he coldly dismissed her.
You've never cared about me before. Now you're asking too much from us. If you want a successor so badly, have one yourself. Don't involve our marriage and children in your nonsense.
My husband declared, my family consists of Summer and the kids only. Then he turned to me with a gentle expression.
Summer, you can stop being her daughter-in-law. I'll marry into your family.
My husband decided to become my family's son-in-law and sever ties with his mother. Upon hearing that, she began to tremble uncontrollably. If my husband becomes a son-in-law in my family, our children will also bear my family name. This means there will be no one to carry on the family name of my in-laws, essentially leading to the family line ending. In other words, it would mean the end of the family line. She continued to cling to my husband, pleading for him to reconsider. However, my husband remained unyielding and refused to listen. While she was making a fuss about needing an heir, her family wasn't particularly wealthy or prominent. My Phil was just an ordinary office worker. And the only thing to inherit was their old and run-down family house, which was over 50 years old. It made us wonder what exactly she thought we would inherit. My husband sneered at her. On the other hand, my own family back in my hometown ran a well-known company. I'm the eldest of 3 sisters, and my parents had always hoped one of us would marry and carry on the family name. My husband was my father's favorite. Apparently, my father had been asking him behind my back for a long time to become a son-in-law and carry on our family name. It seems that after this incident, my husband finally made up his mind to become an adopted son-in-law.
That's what they call carrying on the family name in situations like this.
After hearing the story from my husband, she left our house with a red face, perhaps due to regret and embarrassment. My father had always praised my husband, saying Ken looks like a laid-back person on the surface, but he can get things done when he has to. I felt like I finally understood what my father had been talking about. Subsequently, my husband officially became an adopted son-in-law in my family, completely cutting ties with his mother. He even quit his job and is set to join the company run by my father. Once we move to my hometown, we won't have to see her anymore. Later on, she persistently tried to convince her eldest son to remarry and have an heir, but he had gotten fed up with that and also severed ties with her. He eventually reconciled with his wife and is now happily living with her in her family's home. As for my MIL, she apparently developed dementia due to the shock of being rejected by her beloved eldest son. And she lives alone in a house where nobody would visit, struggling with loneliness and anxiety. I have no idea what has happened to her since. My children and I, freed from her grasp, live happily by my reliable husband's side. While I can't help but feel a little sorry for her, thinking that she might have been a part of this family if she hadn't meddled unnecessarily, it's all in the past. My husband has experienced loneliness since he was a child. Now I have my husband and 2 children, born between us. My goal is to ensure that every member of our family feels an abundance of love. I'm determined to live my life focusing on my family's well-being and happiness.